The truth is, over time, the feelings in our relationships do change. The butterflies and exhilarating rush of falling in love is not permanent. But that does not mean that this feeling disappears. It simply evolves into a more mature love. But does mature love mean foregoing passion? Is it really possible to sustain desire with a single partnership for the entirety of our lives? We want to tell you it is a resounding yes. It is absolutely possible to maintain and even deepen our feelings of passion and intimacy for decades to come, provided we have the right understanding. This is the conversation today here on Master Your Marriage.
So recently, I've been fielding a lot of requests to delve into the intricate world of hormones and sexual desire. And let me tell you, as I began outlining this topic, it became really clear quickly that there's a ton of material to cover. In fact, I found myself with enough content for at least 4 full episodes.
Yeah, and I keep seeing the requests come in. I'm like, oh boy, we're going to have to tackle
Yes.
this one. One of the things that our listeners appreciate about our show is our commitment to keeping our episodes close and tight, under 30 minutes. This format fits perfectly into your commute or a gym session, and we aim to deliver content that's both informative and concise within that block of time.
Yep. And so here's the plan. Today's episode marks the beginning of a series that's going to be dedicated to exploring sexual desire. And we're kicking things off today by diving into the concept of owning our desire. Then next week, we'll take a closer look at how hormones ebb and flow throughout our lives, which of course influences desire along the way.
Then we'll be joined by a special guest to discuss the safety and efficacy of hormone replacement therapy. And finally, we'll wrap up the series with an episode on the relationship between emotional maturity and sexual desire. So mark your calendars for the next 3 Wednesdays as we drop each of these much needed and super valuable episodes. You're not going to want to miss any of them. If you're new here, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you'll get notifications when these come out. Today, our focus is on owning and sustaining our sexual desire. Much of our material that we'll discuss today is based on Esther Perel's research and her book, Mating in Captivity, which, if this episode resonates with you, might be good follow-up reading.
Yeah, it's a good one. Okay, so here's the thing. One of our favorite TV and movie genres that we like to watch is historical dramas. We watch them all the time. And for me personally, one of the things I enjoy about them is I find it fascinating. I'm really fascinated by the depiction of relationships and specifically sexuality through the ages. I think it's interesting because if we look back through history, we find that sex was primarily viewed in the past as a means for procreation or a form of marital obligation. It was a duty, a marital duty on the part of the woman, regardless of whether she liked it, whether she wanted it. It was her responsibility to provide it for her husband.
And based on the historical stuff, oftentimes it was about creating offspring that would either bring two
Correct.
nations together or who was the next heir or
Correct.
any of those types of things. So women really had a tough role. Their job was to create an heir.
Yes.
In these shows. Meanwhile, the men in this same genre often held the privilege of being able to seek sexual fulfillment outside of the bounds of their primary partnership with anyone they wanted to, with no consequence.
Exactly. And in some societies, and this is obviously historically accurate in many societies, like in Imperial China, for example, additional women were actually contracted to a man to be his second wife, his third wife, his concubine, without any rights or status given to those additional women.
So let's fast forward to maybe the past 6 decades or so. And then we see this seismic cultural shift. Sexuality is no longer solely about reproduction and offspring. It's now very much a part of our lifestyle. We have sex for connection. We have sex for pleasure. Marriage once was this pragmatic arrangement that forged these family alliances. Now it's morphed into this union where there's much more emphasis placed on love and mutual choice and connection.
And that's what's interesting. It's that mutual choice.
The choice.
That changes everything, that has changed everything, because now we have a relationship where sexuality is based on really just one motivator. And that motivator is desire. Because Now, relationships are primarily monogamous, and because they require the free choice, of course, of the two people who are in that relationship, desire is what is going to keep sexuality going on long term through the ages.
Yeah, we have to keep desire going, and we're going to talk about that.
Yeah.
Together as a couple, we encourage sexual intimacy, not out of obligation, but because we want it and because it brings us pleasure, brings us joy and a deeper connection one with another.
Yeah. And this is such an amazing and beautiful revolution that honestly really didn't exist prior to maybe 60 years ago. When you think about that, that's kind of wild.
It is. That's a little crazy,
to think about
right?
that this is really kind of this new experiment, because prior to that, women didn't have all that much autonomy over their body, over their sexuality, at least not in the way that they do today. I mean, if you think about how things have changed, prior to the 1970s, women couldn't sign their own bank checks. They couldn't get a credit card in their name. They couldn't legally refuse their husband if he wanted sex. And in fact, that didn't really change in all 50 states until the 90s.
That is just, I don't want to say that's barbaric, but think about the times in which we lived. And to think about the fact that we grew up in the 70s and 80s.
We did. We did. And we got married in the 90s.
In the 90s
when finally the last of the 50 states finally made it illegal for a man to
force himself on his wife,
to rape his wife. It was not illegal prior to the 90s in all 50 states.
This is such a head scratcher.
It is. So really, this is new. This is truly a grand new experiment where two free individuals actually get to choose each other with full autonomy, and they desire each other.
But herein lies this paradox and the challenge of this new revolution that's been created. For the first time in history, we are tasked with sustaining desire for a single partnership for the entirety of our lives.
And our lives are longer.
Yeah.
We live much longer lives.
Yeah.
So we're talking decades, 50, 60 years. And during that time, we want these dynamic, intimate, passionate sexual connections with this one person, year after year, decade after decade, until we die. But here's the thing. Both people have to want it, because we have autonomy now. Both people have to want it. They have to desire it for that system to work.
Yeah. And for many of you that have been married more than 15 or 20 years, you know the question that young people like to ask you. It's like, isn't sex boring?
Oh my gosh, I love that question.
Yeah.
Like, you don't even know how cool it can actually be yet, dude. Like,
yeah.
What
isn't sex boring?
About?
It's just the same person. Like, no, you have no idea. So getting back on track, this begs the question, how do we sustain that desire for each other? And how do we keep that spark alive and thrilling over the course of a lifetime? And when this lifetime is spent with one person, this can be an amazing question, but also a daunting one. How do we keep that spark alive?
And this is interesting and probably a little bit shocking for most of you who are listening right now, but the research,
I can't wait to hear.
The research shows that women actually get bored with monogamy much sooner than men.
Never would have thought that until you showed me the research.
If you were to actually look at a line graph of men's desire versus women's desire and watched how it falls over time, you would find that men's desire kind of just goes down just a little bit over this long period of time, whereas women's desire actually starts to drop much more rapidly after marriage. So why is that?
Well, in the past, it's always been believed that the reason for this is that women care less about sex than men. However, more often than not, that is not the case, is it?
Yeah, it's really not.
What we're learning is that's not the case. Yeah.
It's really more that women are probably just as interested in having sex as men are. The difference is that women want sex that's worth having. They care about the kind of sex that they're having, that they're experiencing, and it's just often not interesting enough for them. They want more seduction. They want more romance. They want more fantasy or pleasure or passion or playfulness. And they just aren't getting that.
Is that why romance novels are still the number one selling genre? I
yeah,
swear.
More than likely. And they're probably like, why isn't Robert doing that?
This is where they're getting their romance.
Right?
Yeah.
Maybe so.
Well, speaking of play, this is sort of interesting. In the animal world, animals have this mating behavior that is called pacing. And it's how animals play and then seduce one another. The male comes in a little bit and then he backs up, and the female comes in a little bit and then she backs up. It's similar to what we might call teasing or seduction or play. And in the animal research, it suggests that females that mate without this pacing, they do not enjoy or find the act of sex rewarding. So while this is interesting, I'm just wondering who get paid to do this research. And did they ask the lions or the zebras, the women, like, did you not? How'd that go for you?
I'm pretty sure there were certain cues that they were looking for when they were observing mating behavior.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that
but
the females didn't enjoy the act of sex unless there was this pacing behavior.
Yeah, unless there was a little bit of seduction or a little bit of that sort of foreplay, I guess is the right word, right?
Foreplay, teasing, playfulness. And isn't that interesting that it's really not that much different for humans, especially women?
Yeah, I mean, you'll hear that all the time, right?
Now, think about what happens in relationships, especially long-term committed relationships, right? You both go to work, you come home, you make dinner, you do the dishes. If you have kids, then you have to give the kids a bath, put the kids to bed. And then you look at each other and you're exhausted at the end of the night and you're like, so do you want to do it tonight or what?
That sounds so sexy.
Right. And for most women, it's not. I mean, I don't think it is for you either, but it's just not very exciting. It certainly isn't clearly by the research. It's not turning her on. So in many cases, women's desire just starts to plummet because it's just not interesting enough.
Yeah. And I don't know if we sort of intuitively got to that point, but I mean, it makes sense about just as you get busy with your lives.
Yes.
Yeah.
That you have to, that either you're going to die of boredom, you're going to stop having sex, or something has to shift.
Yeah.
Right.
But here's the problem. Humans are this very extremely contradictory creature. On one hand, we want this safety and security. We like the predictability and familiarity, but predictability and familiarity is not very sexy, right? Or it's not very romantic either.
Right.
Same old Robert comes home at 6, goes to bed at 10, gets up at 6.
Yeah, this is another super
it's a conundrum, right?
Conundrum is a good word. This is an interesting paradox within relationships because as women, it is absolutely true that we need to feel safe in order for our bodies to be able to relax, to be able to have an orgasm, to be able to enjoy sex. However, paradoxically, passion is allergic to this sort of status quo, which is interesting to think about because I don't function very well without safety, but I also, on the other hand, I'm going to get bored with safety, right? So if you think about that, like passion demands some unexpected, a little mystery, a little bit of danger. If you think about exhibitionism, like we've talked to you guys before about how one of the things we've done on trips is gone skinny dipping, right? You go skinny dipping in a little place, you might get caught, but it's just a little risky. And there's that thrill of the unexpected. And those are the things that make it erotic, that make it fun, And so yes, on one hand, we need safety, but then we get bored with safety and we want passion. And so we expect our partner, Robert, right? As a woman, I'm expecting my partner to give me all of this.
That's a lot to ask for.
Right.
We need same old safety and then edgy
and safety.
Edgy and safety.
Right?
Yeah.
We want them to give us passion, but predictability, edgy, but safety, freedom, but security.
No wonder we get lost.
Exciting, but familiar, right? We need them to provide us with stability, but then I want some novelty.
So for the guys out there, you're just saying to yourself, I don't know what you want from me.
Right.
And that's a tough order. So Esther Perel says it in her book, Mating and Captivity. Today, we turn to one person to provide what an entire village once did, a sense of grounding, meaning, and community. And at the same time, we expect our committed relationships to be as romantic and emotionally and sexually fulfilling. Is it any wonder that many relationships sort of crumble under the weight of all of this?
Exactly. So perhaps one of the ways we sustain desire and reconcile this contradiction that we have within ourselves is to stop expecting our partner to be the one person for us, because the truth is that there is no such thing.
Yeah. Isn't that a little bit freeing when we see it that way?
Right. Maybe we get out of this paradox by just realizing that one person can't fulfill every checkbox for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe what we need to actually start doing is we need to start owning our wanting. How do we own our wanting?
I like that. Own your wanting.
How can we take greater responsibility for our individual desire rather than expecting our partner to always be the one to turn us on? And that doesn't mean that we can't still, of course, turn each other on, but maybe we need to free our partner from this massive responsibility to be 100% responsible for our desire and start becoming more of an active participant in it.
Okay. I like this.
Okay. So
we have a list.
We have an exercise.
Let's do this. Okay.
All right. So what we want you to do is we want you to grab a piece of paper
or open your notes app.
I've done this. I'm going to share with you some of my answers in a minute, but I want you to write down the following sentences and then fill in the blank later. The first one is, I turn myself off when blank, and I turn myself off by blank. Notice I didn't say my partner turns me off when, my partner turns me off by, but I turn myself off when. Interesting reframe, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it really is to all of a sudden take responsibility for our own
wanting
and
our
desire. Yeah.
What turns us on.
Yeah. So this is good, right? You have a list?
And avoiding what it doesn't. So here's some things that are on my list of what turns me off.
We have this written down somewhere?
Yeah, you want a list?
Yeah, I know.
Should I text it to you?
Yeah, you should text it to me. I'm looking for my notes app right now.
Okay.
See if I can find that.
All right. So I wrote down a few things.
Okay.
First is I am turned off when I say yes to things when I meant to say no and should have said no.
Overextend, yeah.
Right. And I've crossed some boundaries with myself. I get turned off when I procrastinate and I let things pile up and I get overwhelmed. When I don't exercise, I get turned off. Or in that same vein, when I don't take care of my health, or when I maybe eat too much sugar or eat unhealthy. When I'm sad, I'm turned off. When I don't feel confident. When I feel weighed down by stress, maybe from work. When I'm checked out. Maybe when I'm just sitting there scrolling TikTok. When I'm apathetic. When I'm not feeling alive. These are times where I feel turned off.
And so all these things are interesting because, well, we don't think about having to take responsibility for our own desire. We can start to recognize what an impact these things have on your ability to just even feel alive, to feel sensual.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And it's interesting because as we sort of put those together, your list, the first half, right? What turns you off? None of those things on that list mention sex.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So now grab your pen again, and I want you to write down the opposite of that. I turn myself on when I turn myself on by. Again, notice I didn't say he turns me on when he turns me on by, which again would be making him 100% responsible for my desire.
Okay. You got a list?
Uh-huh.
Let's hear it. I'm interested.
Which list are you more excited about?
I mean, of course I want to know the turns you on list, but
okay.
I'm just going to be looking for things that I can affect.
Okay. First, I am turned on when I'm grounded in nature. If I get outside, I go for a hike. I'm turned on if I can play music, sing,
and
dance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know you like to dance.
I am turned on when I'm creative. For me, anything I do that utilizes my creativity, I feel like I'm in my element. I feel like I'm alive. And I think that's this list. I think that's the common denominator with all of these things is things that make me feel alive.
Yeah.
If I'm dreaming, if I'm planning the future, if I'm excited about something that's coming up, if I feel confident, I think confidence is probably number one for probably most women. Probably our greatest turn on is feeling confident. Anytime I'm feeling good about myself in general, or I feel respect for myself, I would say that's what turns me on.
So again, even with this list, I noticed that it didn't have anything to do with sex or foreplay. It had more about how you felt about yourself and your perception of yourself, your perception of self.
Yep, exactly. So what you start to see, and also if you're doing this exercise at home, you're probably going to start to notice the same thing, is that that long-term desire, if you're in a long-term relationship, it's going to have a lot more to do with vibrancy, life force, how you feel about yourself than it does with, oh, let's try this sex position, or, hey, rub my feet, get me in the mood, try this foreplay thing. It has more to do with living in our element. When we feel alive, we're able to be the best version of ourselves. And then we're able to give the best version of ourselves to each other, which means we're putting less pressure on our partner to be our everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But how do we really do that? I mean, we still have jobs. We still have, we have all of these things that we need to do that are adding stress. We have kids and work and projects and responsibilities, and all this just keeps happening to us.
Yes.
Life happens, right?
Yep.
So how do you own your desire and then come alive in the midst of all of this chaos? Because life can be chaotic.
What a good question, right? How do we get more of those things that are on our list? How do we do that? How do we feel those things? How do we feel alive? How do we own our desire? And I think the answer truly is that we have to start by deciding. We have to decide that this matters to us. We have to decide it, and we have to own our responsibility in it. We have to own our desire, own and take responsibility for it, right? We have to grow up enough to realize that having good sex in a committed relationship, in this long-term committed relationship, isn't something that's just going to happen by accident.
Yeah. Yeah. And so many people argue with us that, great sex should just happen. If you're compatible, then great sex will just happen, and it will happen naturally. And this is often brought up by people who are not in 20, 30 and 40-year marriages.
No.
Actually not really even married, right?
No, these are usually people that are like, oh, it should just happen,
I'm looking for the right person because it's just going to happen.
How long you've been in a relationship? Oh, 3 months. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you're still in that phase.
So if it was going to just happen, it would have happened already. So honestly, ask yourself, how's that working out for you, dude?
Yeah.
Yeah. This like it should just happen thing.
And going back to what we said earlier, when you get to the end of the night and you're exhausted and you've just put the kids to bed and you look at each other and you say, so do you want to do it or not? Like,
that sounds so sexy. Do you want to just do it or not?
How well is that really happening for you?
Yeah.
How is that really working?
It's not working very well. So committed sex in a relationship requires us to own it and create the right conditions for it to happen. And if you create the right conditions for it to happen, guess what? It will happen naturally.
Yes, but you're doing a little bit more
but you're already working for it, right? So sex needs to be more premeditated in long-term relationships. You have to think about all of the other things in the background, the stressors, and understanding those pieces that are going to help you turn yourself on and understand the things that turn you off as well.
Yes.
And take some responsibility for that on your own.
100%. I love it when people say, oh, it isn't romantic if you have to plan sex, if it's premeditated, if you have to schedule it. And I'm like, well, it isn't very romantic. Again, you look at each other exhausted at 11 o'clock and say, well, I guess a quickie would do.
Yeah.
that
doesn't
so
even
romantic,
sound great.
Right? That's not passionate. That's not adventurous. That's not seductive or playful. But some things are.
But you know what? Here's an idea, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you take a half day off of work, or you take a day off of work. And so it's just the two of you. You can plan that, drop the kids off at school, and then have breakfast sex, followed by like a morning date or something. Like, there are ways to kind of make these things happen in your relationship. I know we're all busy, and I know that, I know the stress of raising kids and having everything going in different directions. but you'll be able to find these little snippets of time. And if you invest in your relationship, when we talk to couples that have been married 50 and 60 and 70 years, like I talked to a couple that have been married 71 years,
Wow.
they always say, like, you have to put the work in. It doesn't just happen.
Doesn't just happen. Yeah. It takes a little planning. It takes a little bit of effort. It takes a lot of intention. And when it comes to sexuality, it takes some premeditation. It takes some planning, because it doesn't just happen by accident.
Yeah, without a doubt. It happens because we've decided that in our relationship, it matters. Our pleasure matters. Our romance matters. Our playfulness matters. So if those things matter, then we've decided to make it a priority.
Mm-hmm.
But people people don't do that. They worry about the responsibility and the security and the status quo in life, and they give each other what's left, the leftovers, and they wonder why they're bored. I'll give you the rest of myself, Charlotte. I'm not going to give you the best of myself. Everybody else has the best, and I'm going to give you what's left at that 11 o'clock. Like, do you want to have a quickie?
Yeah.
And if we give ourselves the rest, if I give you what's left of me, the rest, that's about what I would expect to have in my sex life.
Yeah.
I'd have leftovers, and not very satisfying leftovers.
No, like 3 days.
And I think that's where people are. I think they're giving their partner what's left of them, the little that they have left to invest. And that's not romantic. That's not sensual. That's not sexy. And part of it's probably out of obligation because it's been a week and,
right. Right. So to keep desire, let's flip this and make this a little bit more positive. To keep desire,
okay,
we have to sometimes, not always, not every day, but sometimes we have to get out of that status quo. We have to do things a little bit out of the ordinary, be a little mischievous, go take some risks, go skinny dipping, take a day off of work and have morning sex, like be playful, do some of those things.
Yeah. And we've said it before and we'll say it again. Foreplay starts at the end of the last orgasm, not 5 minutes before the next act. And yeah, that includes all of the little things that we do for each other, the acts of kindness, the words of appreciation, the kisses, the cuddles, the little notes, the texts that we send to each other, the appreciation we speak to each other, and the time that we invest in our friendship.
And in addition to all those things, foreplay is also the inner work that we do on ourselves, the self work. It's going back to that list of I turn myself on when, I turn myself on by, and it's taking responsibility and adding in more of those things that make us feel alive. For me, maybe that's going to yoga. Maybe it's going to Pilates. Maybe it's getting up and exercising with Robert in the mornings before he leaves for work and I get on the rower. Maybe it's taking time to be in nature, working in my garden, being out in the sun, getting some tan, being creative, feeling confident, right? Anything and everything that makes me feel alive is what I need to take responsibility for, because as a woman, that's how we unlock our erotic intelligence. That is how I take responsibility for turning myself on. So what is it that you need to do to come alive? Look at your list. I turn myself on by, I turn myself on when. Is there something on that list that stands out to you today? Whatever comes to mind, commit to more of that in your life, because that is what fuels eroticism and passion. And that is what's going to play a big part in sustaining your desire through the decades to come.
Yeah. And I want you to think about, we've talked about values often on this show, and we actually have a course on values that's linked below. But in our annual assessment, in our annual retreat that we do a values assessment. And if you think about, just even Charlotte's list, nature and hikes and taking time for herself, if you thought about your values in your relationship and the things that are important to you for your self-care, for taking responsibility for your own eroticism, taking responsibility for your own sexuality, those things should be on your top 5. Like, I know the things that are important to Charlotte because we've done the values assessment. And in her values, time outdoor, play, excitement, those are things that come up on her top 10 values. So we align those values, and then we try to create experiences, and I try to support her so that her values can then be met. And guess what? As I support her in getting her values met, she feels more confident. She feels more safe. She feels like she has excitement, and she's been in nature. We just got back from a camping trip. So I think as you understand your partner's values across the spectrum, but as it relates to marriage and relationship and sex, you become better informed about the things that you can do, the opportunities that you can create in your relationship to allow this sexuality to just flourish.
And I hope these are conversations that you're able to have with your significant other. Have these conversations about what you value, about what turns you on, about what turns you off, about what you need more of. And as you know, we talk all the time about it. Not only prioritize those things, but ritualize those things. Create rituals of connection, create rituals for your self-care so that you are taking that responsibility out to make your relationship more intentional.
Yeah. And if Charlotte does those things, what turns me on, what turns me off, right? If you do those things, you're bringing your best self to the relationship.
Right.
And if I do the things, what turns me on, what turns me off, right? If I'm maintaining that, if I've given the space and I'm given the time and I understand those things, then I'm bringing my best self to the relationship.
And while men perhaps are, their desire doesn't plummet in the research the way women's does, you still are more alive when you get to do those things and you are able to bring your best self to me.
Yeah.
Even though we could say, oh, well, men can just turn it on whenever they want. Maybe that's true. Maybe that's not so true. It's certainly true that when you are living in your element, you're able to give more to me and more to our sexual intimacy.
Yeah. So a question for you. Are you bringing your best to your sexual relationship? Or are you just bringing the rest? Yeah. What's left? As we wrap up today's show, we'd love to hear your thoughts on today's episodes. Come on over to social media. On Instagram, we're most active. And let's continue the conversation there. Thank you for joining us, and we're grateful for you. You know, the algorithm depends on your ratings and comments to help us reach a much bigger audience. And if you haven't yet, would you please leave us a 5-star review?
And a comment if you can to go with that.
Yeah.
So, and more importantly though, as always, if there is someone in your life that needs help in their relationship that would benefit from this episode, would you please kindly share it with them? Of course, be kind to each other this week. Take care of each other. Remember, it's the small things done often that make the biggest impact.
Until next time.